The funeral home smelled of lilies and expensive perfume. 200 people filled the reception hall, their black suits and dresses blending into a sea of performative grief. My father had been dead for exactly 4 days, and his third wife was already planning her financial future. I stood near the back wall, watching Patricia work the room like a seasoned politician. She wore a perfectly tailored black dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon. 42 years old. She'd been married to my father for exactly 18 months before his heart attack. Now she moved from group to group, accepting condolences with practiced grace, her hand frequently touching her chest in a gesture of devastation that never quite reached her eyes. My older brother Marcus stood beside her, his arm protectively around her shoulders. At 35, he'd always been Dad's golden child, the successful investment banker, the one who married well, the one who produced 2 grandchildren. He caught my eye across the room, and his expression hardened slightly before he looked away. "Elena, honey, are you holding up okay?" My Aunt Caroline approached with a plate of finger sandwiches. I had no interest in eating. She'd been my mother's sister and one of the few people here who actually seemed to remember that I'd lost a parent. "I'm fine, Aunt Caroline. Thank you. You're standing here all alone. Come sit with us. Your uncle and I saved you a seat." "I'm okay here, really." I managed a small smile. I like being able to see everyone. She squeezed my hand and moved on. Her concern was genuine, but ultimately useless. No one here understood what I was actually feeling. How could they? They all thought I was the disappointment. The 30-year-old daughter who'd walked away from the family real estate business to become a marine biologist who lived in a modest apartment and drove a 10-year-old Honda, who'd somehow failed to live up to the Martinez family standards. That's when Patricia's voice cut through the low murmur of conversation. If I could have everyone's attention for just a moment. She stood near the fireplace, a glass of wine in her hand. The room quieted. I know Walter would want us to celebrate his life, not mourn his death. He was always so forward-thinking, always planning for the future. I felt my jaw tighten. Dad had been dead for 4 days. "Many of you know about the beach house in Malibu," Patricia continued, her voice carrying that practiced warmth she'd perfected. "Walter's pride and joy. 2,500 square feet of oceanfront paradise. He bought it 30 years ago when Malibu was still affordable. Well, relatively speaking." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. "That property is now worth somewhere between 4 and 5 million. My Uncle James whistled low. "That's quite an asset, Patricia." "It is." She smiled. But there was something calculating in it. And Walter left very clear instructions about what should happen to it. He wanted it to stay in the family, to be enjoyed by those who truly appreciated what he built. My stomach dropped. I knew where this was going. "The property is now mine," Patricia announced, her chin lifting slightly. "And I've decided that the best way to honor Walter's memory is to sell it and use the proceeds to establish a scholarship fund in his name at Stanford, where he got his MBA. The room erupted in approving murmurs. People moved forward to congratulate her, to tell her how generous she was, how Dad would be so proud. Marcus beamed at her like she had just announced a cure for cancer. "That's 4 million that could help hundreds of students," someone said. "Walter always valued education," another voice added. I stayed exactly where I was, my back against the wall, watching the performance. Patricia's eyes found mine across the room for just a second, and I saw the triumph there. This wasn't about honoring Dad. This was about making sure I knew my place. My cousin Jennifer approached Patricia with a hug. "When are you listing it?" "Tomorrow, actually." Patricia's smile widened. "I've already been in contact with Morrison and Associates. They're the top luxury real estate firm in Los Angeles. The market is perfect right now, and I don't see any reason to wait. The house has been sitting empty anyway. Walter barely used it these last few years." That was a lie. Dad had used it constantly. He just hadn't invited Patricia. "I'm listing it tomorrow morning," Patricia continued, her voice carrying across the room. "Donna Morrison herself is handling the sale. She expects multiple offers within the first week. More congratulations, more praise for her generosity and quick thinking." Marcus shook hands with several business associates, already positioning himself as Patricia's advisor in this magnanimous gesture. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I pulled it out and saw Donna Morrison's name on the screen. My finger hovered over the decline button for a second before I made a decision. I answered and put it on speaker, holding the phone at my side so the volume would carry. "Miss Martinez, I'm so sorry to call during such a difficult time." Donna's professional voice filled the sudden silence that had fallen around me, "but I need to speak with you about your beachfront listing. We have 3 serious buyers already interested, and I wanted to confirm the asking price before I schedule the showings tomorrow." The room went completely still. Every single person turned to look at me. Patricia's face had frozen mid-smile, her wine glass suspended halfway to her lips. "Miss Morrison, now isn't the best time," I said quietly into the phone, watching Patricia's expression transform from confusion to something harder. Of course, but just quickly. Are we still going with 4.8 million, or did you want to test the market at 5? The comparable sales in the last quarter support either number." I could feel 200 pairs of eyes on me. My brother had gone pale. Patricia's hand was shaking slightly, wine threatening to slosh over the rim of her glass. "We'll discuss it tomorrow, Donna. Thank you for calling." "Absolutely." "Again, my condolences on your father's passing. He was so proud of what you'd accomplished. I'll email you the listing details tonight. Goodbye, Elena." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the funeral home's thick carpet. Patricia found her voice first. "That must be some kind of mistake." She laughed, but it sounded brittle. "Donna obviously has her clients confused. Walter left the beach house to me. It's in the will." I slipped my phone back into my clutch and met her gaze steadily. "Actually, Patricia, it's not in the will because Dad sold the house to me 6 years ago." "That's absurd." Marcus stepped forward, his investment banker authority kicking in. "Dad would never. We would have known about something like that." "Why would you have known?" I asked calmly. "It was a private transaction between a father and his daughter. We handled it through a family trust to avoid exactly this kind of drama." Aunt Caroline's hand went to her mouth. "Elena, is this true?" "Completely true. Dad sold me the Malibu property in June 2019 for fair market value, $2.1 million at the time. I've owned it outright for 6 years. I've paid the property taxes, the insurance, the maintenance, everything." Patricia's face had gone from pale to flushed. "This is ridiculous. Walter never said a word to me about selling that house. Not one word. You've only known him for 3 years, Patricia. He sold it to me 3 years before you met. Then why did he still use it? Why did he have keys? Why did he talk about it like it was his?" Her voice was rising, the careful composure cracking. "Because I let him use it whenever he wanted," I said simply. "It was his home for 30 years before it was mine. I wasn't going to take that away from him. He came down almost every weekend, sometimes during the week when he needed to think." "You knew about those trips?" Marcus was scrolling frantically through his phone. "Now, if this is true, there would be records. Title transfers, deed recordings, Los Angeles County Recorder Office, June 15, 2019. Document number 2019-084-7362. Feel free to look it up. It's public record." My Uncle James, who'd been an attorney before retirement, spoke up carefully. "Elena, even if this is true, and I'm not saying it isn't, but even if it is, why keep it secret? Why not tell the family?" I took a slow breath. This was the part one dreaded because Dad asked me to. He wanted me to have security, something that was mine. He knew that Marcus was doing well in finance, that he didn't need help. But he also knew that I'd chosen a different path, one that didn't pay investment banker salaries. The marine biology work I do is important, but it's not lucrative. "So he gave you a multi-million-dollar house." Patricia's voice dripped with disbelief and anger. "Just handed it over." "He sold it to me at market value," I repeated firmly. "I took out a mortgage. I paid him every month for 5 years until it was paid off last year. I have every canceled check, every bank statement, every piece of documentation you could possibly want." Marcus looked like he'd been slapped. "You paid him $2 million on a marine biologist's salary? That's impossible." I also worked as a consultant for 3 different environmental firms. I wrote 2 books on coastal ecosystem preservation that did surprisingly well. I gave up my social life, my vacations, every luxury, and I lived in a studio apartment for 5 years to make those mortgage payments. It wasn't easy, but I did it because that house meant something to me. It meant Dad believed I could do it. Jennifer, my cousin, spoke softly. Walter used to brag about your work, Elena, about the coral restoration project, the sea turtle conservation. I always wondered why he seemed so proud when. She trailed off, embarrassed. When everyone else in the family thought I was wasting my PhD, I finished for her. Yeah, Dad understood what I was building. He understood that success isn't only measured in portfolio values. Patricia slammed her wine glass down on the nearest table. This is unbelievable. I've been planning this scholarship fund for weeks. I've already spoken to Stanford's development office. I made commitments based on that property value. Based on property you didn't own, Aunt Caroline said quietly. Patricia, dear, I'm sorry, but if Elena has the documentation. Of course I have the documentation. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. I can send the deed, the title insurance policy, the escrow statements, all of it. Would you like me to forward them to everyone here? Make it a group email. The color drained from Patricia's face. Around the room, I could see the realizations settling in. The whispers started quietly at first, then building. She's owned it for 6 years. Walter sold it to her before he even met Patricia. That means Patricia never had any claim to it. Did she even check the estate documents before announcing this? Marcus pulled Patricia aside, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. She shook her head violently, her perfect composure completely shattered. She'd made her announcement in front of 200 people, accepted their congratulations, positioned herself as the generous widow honoring her husband's legacy. And now everyone knew she'd been wrong, more than wrong. She'd assumed she'd taken something that wasn't hers and tried to dispose of it publicly, dramatically, in a way that would maximize her social capital. And she'd done it at my father's wake in front of everyone who mattered in Los Angeles business and society circles. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Donna Morrison. Elena, I'm getting calls from 3 separate family members claiming ownership of your property. Should I send them the title documentation or would you prefer to handle it privately? I typed back quickly, send them everything. Public record anyway. Thank you. Within seconds, I heard phones buzzing around the room. Donna had clearly CC'd her response to everyone who'd contacted her. I watched Marcus read his phone, his face going from red to white. He showed the screen to Patricia, and I saw her actually stagger. The title documentation was clear. The property at 23847 Pacific Coast Highway, Malibu, California, was owned by Elena Maria Martinez. Purchased June 15, 2019. No liens, no encumbrances, no co-owners, just me. I think, Aunt Caroline said into the silence, her voice carrying clearly, that perhaps Patricia made an honest mistake. The estate is complicated, and grief can cloud our judgment. It was a kindness Patricia didn't deserve. But Aunt Caroline had always been gracious. Patricia didn't accept the lifeline. This is fraud. Walter would never have kept something like this from me. Elena must have forged documents, manipulated him when he was vulnerable. Stop. The voice came from the front of the room. Robert Brennan, my father's attorney for 30 years, stepped forward. He'd been sitting quietly throughout the whole exchange, and I'd almost forgotten he was there. Patricia, I'm going to stop you right there before you say something actionable. He moved to the center of the room, his presence commanding immediate attention. I handled the sale of the Malibu property in 2019. I drew up the documents. I witnessed the signatures, and I filed the deed with the county recorder's office. Everything was done legally, properly, and at Walter's explicit instruction. Patricia opened her mouth, but Robert held up his hand. Furthermore, Walter specifically instructed me that this information was private. It was not to be disclosed to anyone outside the immediate transaction unless Elena chose to disclose it. The property was never part of his estate because he didn't own it when he died. It hasn't been his property for 6 years. He turned to address the room. I understand this is shocking news for some of you, but Elena has done nothing wrong. She bought a property from her father at fair market value. She paid for it in full, and she allowed him to continue using it because she loved him. That's the entire story. Marcus found his voice. But why hide it? Why not tell us? Robert's expression softened slightly. That's not my story to tell. That's between Elena and her late father. But I will say this. Walter Martinez was one of the sharpest businessmen I ever knew. He didn't make this decision lightly, and he didn't make it despite anyone. He made it because he believed it was the right thing to do. Patricia grabbed her purse. I need air. I can't. She pushed through the crowd toward the exit. Marcus hesitated, torn between following her and staying to salvage what he could of the situation. Eventually, he followed her, leaving murmured conversations in his wake. As the crowd began to disperse into smaller groups, processing what they had just witnessed, my Uncle James approached. Elena, I owe you an apology. We've all been so quick to judge your choices, your career path. We assumed you were struggling. I was struggling, I said honestly. For 5 years, I struggled to make those mortgage payments. I ate rice and beans. I wore the same 3 outfits to conferences. I said no to every invitation, every trip, every expense that wasn't absolutely necessary. But it was my struggle and I chose it. Aunt Caroline hugged me tightly. Your father was so proud of you. He told me once that you reminded him of himself at your age, willing to sacrifice everything for something you believed in. Jennifer joined us, her eyes red. I'm sorry I didn't defend you more when they'd talk, when Marcus would make comments about your little fish projects. I should have said something. It's okay, I said, and I meant it. I didn't need defending. I knew what I was building. Over the next hour, the funeral home slowly emptied. People approached me with a mixture of curiosity and newfound respect. The marine biologist who lived modestly wasn't quite so disappointing when she owned $4.8 million in Malibu real estate free and clear. But that wasn't why Dad had sold it to me, and it wasn't why I'd bought it. As the last guest trickled out, Robert Brennan approached with a manila envelope. Your father left this with me. He said to give it to you after the funeral. Once everything had settled. Given tonight's events, I think now might be the right time. Inside was a letter in Dad's handwriting, dated 2 months before his death. Elena, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And I imagine Patricia has tried to claim the beach house. I'm sorry you had to deal with that scene, but I suspected it would happen. She never understood why I spent so much time there, why I kept going back even after we married. She thought it was about the property value, the investment. She never understood that it was about the peace. You understood from the time you were 8 years old and we'd spend weekends there looking at tide pools. You understood what that place meant. It wasn't about money. It was about connection to the ocean, to nature, to something bigger than quarterly profits and market shares. When you told me you wanted to study marine biology, Marcus said you were wasting your potential. Your stepmother said you'd never make a real living. But I saw your eyes light up when you talked about coral reefs and ocean conservation, the same way my eyes lit up when I made my first real estate deal. That's how I knew you'd found your calling. The house is yours because you earned it. Not just financially, but spiritually. You'll protect that stretch of coastline. You'll use it for your research, for teaching, for showing people why the ocean matters. That's worth more than any scholarship fund or investment portfolio. Don't let them make you feel small for choosing meaning over money. You're the most successful of all my children because you know what success actually means. Love always. Dad. I folded the letter carefully, tears blurring my vision. Robert squeezed my shoulder and left me alone in the empty funeral home. My phone buzzed. Marcus's name appeared on the screen. I almost declined, but something made me answer. Elena. His voice was tight. We need to talk about this, about the house, about Dad's decisions. This isn't fair. What isn't fair, Marcus? You got Dad's approval your entire life. You got his pride at every business dinner, every family gathering. You got introduced as my son, the investment banker, while I was Elena, who studies fish. Patricia got 18 months of marriage to a wealthy man and whatever the actual will says she gets. I got a mortgage that nearly broke me and a father who believed I could handle it. Silence on the other end. The house was never about the money, Marcus. It was about Dad trusting me with something he loved. If you can't understand that, then we don't have anything else to discuss. I hung up before he could respond. Outside, the Los Angeles night was cool and clear. I stood in the parking lot looking up at stars. You could barely see them through the light pollution. Tomorrow, I'd drive down to Malibu. I'd walk the beach in front of the house Dad had loved, the house he trusted me to protect. I'd check on the tide pools we'd explored together when I was 8, documenting the species that lived there, continuing the work that mattered. The funeral home door opened behind me. Aunt Caroline emerged, Uncle James beside her. Elena, honey, do you need a place to stay tonight? You shouldn't be alone. I'm going to the beach house, I said. I want to be close to Dad. She nodded, understanding. He loved you so much. I hope you know that. I do now. They left and I was alone in the parking lot with my phone and my father's letter. I read it again slowly this time, letting each word sink in. Tomorrow, Donna Morrison would list the property. We'd set the price at $4.8 million, maybe test the market at $5 million. The offers would come in, probably multiple bids in the first week like she'd predicted, and then I'd turn them all down because the house was never for sale. Not really. Dad had known Patricia would try this. He'd known Marcus would feel entitled. He'd known the family would judge my choices, my career, my life, and he'd set this all up, the private sale, the secret ownership, the letter with his attorney, to make sure that when the moment came, I'd have exactly what I needed. Not just the property. The validation. The proof that he'd understood me, believed in me, trusted me with what mattered most to him. I got in my Honda, the 10-year-old car that had embarrassed Marcus at family dinners, the one Patricia had called adorable in that way that meant pitiful. And I drove west toward the ocean, toward the house that was mine, toward the life I'd built, mortgage payment by mortgage payment, sacrifice by sacrifice. The marine biology work would continue, the coral restoration projects, the sea turtle conservation, the coastal ecosystem studies that actually mattered. And I'd do it all from the beach house in Malibu, the one Dad had trusted me to protect. Patricia could keep her scholarship fund fantasy. Marcus could keep his investment portfolios and his golden child status. I had something better. I had my father's respect, and I had earned every single piece of it. The Pacific Coast Highway stretched before me. Dark ocean on one side, mountains on the other. My phone buzzed with incoming messages, family members wanting to talk, to understand, to probably position themselves for whatever they thought they could still get from this situation. I turned my phone off and drove in silence, heading home to the sound of waves and the smell of salt air, to the place where I'd always belonged.